let's start off by asking, where did this idea come about for you for this film? Because so many people, I think, out there think that motor racing is for the rich, but they don't realize that how many guys there are that are involved with car racing that aren't rich. So tell us a little bit about how this film came about for you.
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question to start from the beginning, right? So the story kind of came from Tim Boyle, one of the main people in it. I knew him through sort of other circles, and he just sort of mentioned to me that he was thinking about becoming a motorsports race car driver with his best mate, who was an accountant, Phil. And he just sort of said, maybe there's a story in it. So I kind of thought, well, why don't we get a camera and start filming and see where this sort of journey unfolds and takes us to. I didn't realize that, he had already sort of, I said, when's your first race? Like, what cars? Like, finding all this information. He's sort of like, I've got a tow truck with a couple of car shells coming, and I've got a race in a couple of weeks, so I've got to turn these car shells into race cars, essentially. So it all kind of happened very kind of, fast and furious, if you appreciate the car pun. And that's sort of how it kind of happened, very kind of organically. And I didn't really know where or how this story would unfold. I kind of knew what I was going to be doing and how I kind of wanted to approach the documentary. But the story sort of kind of found me a little bit in that sort of way.
You mentioned that you knew how you wanted to approach the documentary. How did you want to approach it? Because, like you said, you didn't know where the story was going to go from the start.
Yeah, and I think that's also how I guess, didn't want to back myself into a corner of making this really kind of slick, stylized, high-end kind of motorsports documentary. Because there's so many more of those out there. And I think really what I found quite remarkable is you kind of had these two underdogs, these two everyday Aussies that, their childhood dreams was to become motorsports race car drivers. So I kind of really wanted to approach it in a very, a gritty kind of way. You're kind of in there with the pits, you're under the hood with them, you're under the car with them, you're, next to them when they have a crash or they spin out. So kind of really wanted to capture that human kind of triumph and spirit. And, I think that's, as humans, we're kind of predisposed to connecting and empathizing with people. And I think sport really kind of, amplifies that human experience. That's kind of really how I kind of wanted to approach it, really kind of get to know who these characters were and, really kind of get into the depth of what it takes for two people to achieve their dreams. So the way we sort of filmed it was largely single camera and just following them around. I didn't want to be too much of myself in the documentary, and you sort of hear me answering a few kind of questions off screen. So I'm kind of sort of always there, but not completely in it with them. And I think that's kind of how the audience really feels like they're kind of a part of the journey as kind of like the co-pilots, if you will.
And how did you find Tim and Phil to work with? Were they kind of down-to-earth guys to work with? Because that's how they come across in the doco.
Yeah, I mean, like, what you see is what you get, right? And I think they kind of are a little bit of a sort of an odd couple, if you will. So you've got Phil, who's, a tradie, he's a, construction guy, and he's very much a dreamer. He just wants to get behind the wheel and drive. And you've got Phil, who's his best mate, and who's an accountant, who's kind of a bit more the voice of reason. So I think that's kind of why they kind of make a really kind of, good camaraderie. And I think that's something that motorsports that, I sort of knew it, but didn't really kind of fully comprehend and understand until I was in amongst it, and just how competitive and technical the sport is, but also on the same token, how that much camaraderie there is in this kind of world of motorsports. It's very family oriented. So yes, I think they kind of paired well, and I think it's sort of the yin and the yang of both of them that I think they were able to succeed, because you kind of need someone that's, willing this thing along, which is Tim, but then you also need someone with a bit of common sense, which is Phil. And I think also importantly, but Tim's wife Linda that kind of speaks to not only the female voice in the audience, but I think because someone like Tim, who's a bit of a tradie, doesn't particularly want to let his emotions show, especially when he has a few kind of down moments throughout, and I think that's where Linda comes in and kind of really gives a little bit more of that emotional insight that Tim doesn't always want to be, saying off the cuff or try and hide.
You mentioned that you knew a little bit about the sport. Would you say that you're a motorsport fan outside of this, or was this something kind of new for you?
Look, it's a little bit of both. I wouldn't say I'm a petrol head. I'm not that kind of side of it. I'll watch Bathurst, and I've always probably more, not so much about the sport itself, but more about cars. I'm not the most mechanically minded person, but I love old vintage cars, and I think that was certainly an appeal for me, especially when I got the Holden, 1970s Geminis. I've got an old vintage car myself, so I think that was something that appealed to me, and I think that's also something, I guess, in our wonderful approach is that there is something quite, entwined in Australian culture with motorsports, and I think that there's something in this that sort of appeals to people that may not actually love motorsports or know a lot about it. So I kind of really wanted to appeal to obviously the people that love motorsports, but also people that don't can definitely find something in this film, Ramblin' Racer, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to do. I think there's something, some people will watch a motorsports race and go, cars are just driving, around and around in a circle on a track. What is exciting about that? And I think once you kind of peel back those layers and you really understand how technical it is, and you sort of understand just the nuances of this sport, you really kind of are quite overwhelmed with just how much there is. It's like drinking from a fire hose of knowledge in understanding what motorsports is, and I think that's also part of the appeal of why people love motorsports so much.
Definitely. And for you yourself personally, you'd been working overseas on some pretty big films. How did it feel coming back to Australia and getting to work on a film that's so personal for you?
Look, it's any production. The difference of working on a Hollywood blockbuster to a smaller indie project or a documentary, it's really just the catering and the craft service table that grows or shrinks depending on your budget. So a lot of my sort of background is in narrative space. So it's a very different kind of mindset, and in documentary and something like this, you kind of have a bit of a sort of a plan, whereas a narrative thing, you have a call sheet and this is what you're doing for the day, more or less. So documentary, you still kind of have that, but you sort of you're at the wheel more. You're literally kind of controlling where this story is shaping and moving, and you have to be a little bit adaptable with what comes up. Narrative space, you're planned, and I think a really large cluster, which I've been very, very fortunate to work on. They're large moving beasts, so they're slower beasts, so they are less nimble and agile to changes, whereas a documentary, and especially something of this nature, which is fast-paced, car could spin out at any moment, and you've got to make those quick decisions about, okay, do I stay here and film this, or do I, because this is all done single camera for the most part, do I try and get back to the pits to Tim when he comes in, where is that shot, where is that moment? So it was really, for me, a great creative freedom to be able to kind of make those kind of decisions and really kind of chase and find where that story is. Sometimes I got it right, sometimes I wish there was two of me or a second kind of camera, or sometimes you're kind of going through and you're wishing you could do things a little bit differently, or wishing some of these moments had happened a little bit differently. So it's certainly a very different kind of experience, but it was also, for me, creatively, quite humbling and quite exciting as well to be able to follow and share and explore where this story was taking us.
Definitely. Now, talking about exciting times, how do you feel now that the film is about to to be part of the Brisbane International Film Festival?
It's very exciting. Like, it's kind of humbling as well. This whole documentary started in I think the first sort of stuff we started filming was in a garage in Brisbane, with a couple of car shells that got dropped off, and Tim and Phil, I'm filming them, and they're looking at the Holden kind of car shells, and I'm thinking, as probably the same as they're thinking, of like, well, this is, where is this going to go? So it's kind of nice to be able to kind of start in a suburban Brisbane garage, and now the project is completed, and it's, in the Brisbane International Film Festival on the big screen. So it's quite a cool experience to kind of come, full circle there.
Awesome. Well, Neil, what would you like to say to everybody out there who's thinking about buying tickets to come along and see this film as part of the festival?
Look, come along. I think it's there's definitely something in it for everyone. This film, you don't have to love motorsports. You might not like motorsports at all, but I think you'll find that there's something in this that two underdogs that go in to achieve their dreams against all the odds. There's definitely something that is in it for everyone for something like this. So Ramblin' Racer is definitely worth the time.
Awesome. Well, thank